Today I'm going to be discussing how I approach analyzing an annual birthday solar return chart. So the moment the sun, our natal sun, returns to its exact birth degree and minutes, which was experienced at birth, that begins the solar return birthday chart for the year. So whatever planetary pattern is active in the sky at that time, that becomes our birthday chart for that year. We will always have our natal imprint and transits and progressions and other techniques used to delineate and forecast the upcoming themes for the year are still accurate. However, the solar return birthday chart adds an excellent tool to further gain insight on themes for the year. It helps an astrologer to zero in on even more prominent themes that stand out, and it really helps the client become more aware of when certain things are going to be more active. So, as I said, we always have our natal birth chart imprint, ongoing transits, progressions, and so forth to help us understand our current circumstances. A solar return chart is a fascinating tool to more deeply understand the planetary themes that we're going to be working with in that year. It's never looked at in isolation. Rather, it's overlaid with the birth chart, and primarily we determine the planetary lord of the year in a solar return chart. What does that mean? Well, we use what's called annual perfections. The annual perfections technique is an ancient Hellenistic technique which links our age each year to one of the 12 astrological houses in a repeating 12-year cycle. For example, if we are having a perfected first house year, we are going to see where that first house ruler, for example, I have 19 Leo rising in my birth chart. So if I'm having a solar return chart and I have 0 Scorpio rising in the birthday chart, well, where is 19 Leo? And whatever house that falls in is my rising sign theme. So that just adds a whole nother layer to understanding, okay, what other house is going to be active? What themes related to that house are going to be more active that year? But first and foremost, the Lord of the year is whatever house is perfected at the time of our birthday. So, if one is having a first house perfection year, we look at the ruler of the first house. For example, I had mentioned I'm Leo rising. So if I was having a first house perfection year, the sun rules Leo. So I would look to the sun as the primary lord of the year. I would see where that sun is in my birthday chart. I would see what aspects it's making in the birthday chart. Is it in a strong position? Is it making flowing aspects to other planets? Is it in one of the angular houses? Is it conjoined one of the 4 major angles? The first house, the 4th house, the 7th house, and the 10th house, which are very active houses. First house being identity, body. 4th house being home, roots, your private life, family. 7th house being significant one-to-one partnerships. 10th house being career, and so forth. So, the rising sign of this solar return chart is also very important. So we look to see where it falls in the natal chart, and as I said earlier, that gives us a secondary theme. So now, what are some themes to consider when we're looking at a solar return? Well, first of all, the annual perfected house is going to give us clues as to where we are ready for growth, progress, or healing, or major developments in the coming year. And you can certainly find an annual perfections chart on the internet. You just Google annual perfections chart in astrology. it will show you the wheel with all the ages which are active each birthday year. So you locate your age and you can see what zodiac house, there are 12 houses, and that house is that important focus for the upcoming year. So some major considerations I look at. Okay, where does the rising sign and the solar return fall in the natal chart? As we discussed earlier, that adds additional information about what's coming up this year. What house is the solar return sun residing in the birthday chart? That speaks volumes about a major area of development, a major area of focus. Are there any planets close to the 4 major angles in the birthday solar return chart, such as I just mentioned, the 1st, 4th, 7th, or 10th? What condition is the Lord of the Year? Is it in domicile? Is it exalted? Domicile means it's in its home sign. It's very comfortable. It has the resources to work with to be efficient and get things done. Is it exalted? It's like an honored guest in someone's house. That means it can do very, very well. It has the resources. Or is it in detriment or fall? That is not bad. However, it just means the planet has to work harder and depend on other resources to get its needs met or its desires met, or its, whatever the planetary indicators are. It needs some assistance, and it might be more challenging that year. So now, with the Lord of the Year, also, we look at, will it station retrograde during the solar return birthday year? Where do the lunar and solar eclipses fall in the solar return chart this year? Of course, as well as in the natal chart, but we also look in the birthday chart. Do they conjoin a major angle or planet? The eclipses tell a very important story about where major events are happening. And also, where do the lunar nodes, the south node and the north node, fall in the birthday chart? Suggesting themes of both releasing and letting go versus evolving and growing in uncharted territory, which is the north node. It challenged us to grow in new areas that we're not entirely comfortable with, we're not entirely familiar with, and we're challenged to, take a bold step forward in that area. So astrologers, they can use several techniques to delineate the birthday chart. However, I would say most commonly used are the annual perfections and also what we call monthly perfections, which go month by month to give monthly themes, which, I won't get into in this discussion. But that provides an additional layer to the annual theme. So I really love solar returns. I have to say it's one of my favorite tools to work with. Once I look at transits and progressions, to see what the overarching themes are. I pull up the solar return and boom, I see, let's say I'll use myself as an example. I am having a 4th house perfected year. I have not had a 4th house perfected year for 12 years now. Okay, so I looked back at my last few 4th house perfected years to give you some examples. So I'm going to go all the way back to when I was 15 years old, which was a very long time ago. So I was having a 4th house perfected year. Now, what does that mean? The 4th house is home, family, private life, roots, domestic themes. I could say more, but it's mostly, the foundation of our lives, okay? So now, when I was 15, I had Pisces rising in my birthday chart, which is ruled by Jupiter. Well, that year, I had Jupiter in Cancer. Jupiter's exalted in Cancer in the 5th house of romance. I also had Mars, which was my Lord of the Year. It's going to be the Lord of the Year every time I have the perfection year. Also in the 5th house. They were well aspected, okay? I also had a stellium of planets in Libra in the 8th house of the birth of the solar return birthday chart. I had Sun, which is very important where the Sun falls. I had Mercury, the North Node, Pluto, all in the 8th house together. And Venus, the ruler, they were all in Libra. Venus, the ruler of that stellium, was in my 7th house of partnership. So there was an indication here that I could potentially, at this young age, have a romance. Usually 5th house is more lighthearted romance versus a heavy commitment that happens in the 7th house. However, the 8th house stellium tells me this was going to be a very intense and transformational year. Intense bonds are often formed with planets in the 8th house. Okay? The 8th house also has to do with joint finances and resources and all things of that nature. However, I was only 15 years old at the time. So this was very significant because I was only 15. I was just shy of turning 16. And I became seriously involved with someone very young. And, you know, I also see the planet Saturn in this chart very close to the 7th house cusp, which can indicate a more serious commitment at a young age. I also looked at the eclipses. I had a North Node eclipse on my Sun that year. The Sun rules my ascendant in my natal chart, which is the 1st house cusp, which is opposite the 7th. So that's the relationship axis. So the North Node solar eclipse is about growing into something that you're meant to be challenged to grow into. It's often, you know, something that we're meant to go in that direction, something that we're meant to move forward into and learn and grow. That's one example. Now, I also had a 4th house perfection year at 39 years old. So what was going on when I was 39? Well, first of all, let's see. I started seeing astrology clients for the very first time. I had studied a lot. I wasn't fully out there practicing full time, but I was seeing clients. I was working in a wellness center. So here's my Sun in this birthday chart in the 11th house, conjunct the midheaven angle, which is career, conjunct Mercury, which is communication, all together in Libra. And also Venus, which rules Libra, is in the 10th house, as well as the moon is in the 10th house of this solar return chart. So this speaks volumes of being involved in a group setting, being involved with groups of people, being involved in maybe an alternative community such as a wellness center, really enjoying what I'm doing, emotionally invested in what I'm doing. This birthday chart shows that I'm doing a lot of communication. Mars, the ruler, the Lord of the Year, was exalted in Capricorn in the 2nd house of resources. I was starting to earn money, my own money, making, being self-employed from my astrology clients. I was also gaining resources through further courses and further study. And I was really driven at that point. I was really passionate about what I was doing. And interesting, the 3rd house of communication in the birthday chart has Uranus there. And Uranus rules astrology. So what was I doing? I was meeting one-on-one clients, discussing their astrological charts. And Uranus was trining my Sun at that time by transit, which really helped bring out that Uranian qualities of freedom and novelty and uniqueness and meeting new people, meeting new groups of people, other astrology students, other colleagues in the healing profession. So that was a really interesting year. And you may think, well, what does that have to do with the fourth house? Well, it was a new foundation for me. Establishing myself. I was working from home a lot also, as well as working out of this wellness center. I was working at home. I was doing most of my work at home and going into the office that I rented at the time. So there's some overlay there. Now, let's see. Oh, I didn't mention. So the ascendant of that chart when I was 39 years old in the solar return chart was Sagittarius, 26 degrees of Sagittarius. Jupiter rules that sign, and it was exalted in the sign of Cancer at that time in the 8th house of profound connections with others. And 26 Sagittarius is found in my 5th house of my natal chart. So my 5th house themes would be up front and center. That is my creative self-expression. I was thoroughly enjoying what I was doing. I was feeling like I had an ability to express myself creatively through using astrology. And Jupiter and Cancer in the 8th house, I got to engage in some very deep and insightful discussions with my clients about emotional themes. Jupiter and Cancer. Jupiter is about faith. It's about education. It's about meaning, the meaning in life. What is the meaning of life? So I would say that year was very rewarding, very interesting. Also, in the 1st house of this birthday chart, I had Pluto there. It was a very transformative year for me in terms of my identity, in terms of what I was doing. I had never thought a few years prior to that I would ever be an astrologer. That just wasn't what I had planned or thought of. I was always interested in it, but I had never seriously studied it. And when you seriously study astrology, you realize it's very deep, it's very profound, and it takes years to master it, honestly. You could take a lifetime and you're still learning. So that was another example. Now let's see. Here's an example, 27 years old. This was a difficult time. Let me pull that up. I pulled the wrong chart up here. I was 27 years old. My husband and I had been trying to get pregnant for a couple of years. We were going through in vitro cycles, okay? This was a big deal. So we had tried several times, and this was, very important to me. I really wanted to have a child, and I was gung-ho about, if it didn't work, I was going to do it again, and I was going to try it again. So in this particular year, 4th house perfection year, again, home, family, roots, trying to have a family. Mars, being the Lord of the year, was in the 10th house of the birthday chart in Libra, which means it was in its detriment, which doesn't give it a lot of strength. The ascendant of the birthday chart was 28 degrees of Capricorn, ruled by Saturn. So that Capricorn brings a heaviness to the year, a strong sense of responsibility, heaviness, challenge, more effort. It's more weighty, a more weighty type of year. I had a stellium of Capricorn planets in my 1st house. And 28 Capricorn falls in my 6th house of my natal chart. And the 6th house can be a house of stress, toil, and labor, health, stress. I pulled my back out that year. I was very out of sorts because I decided to stop doing the in vitro cycles after, I was exhausted. I was traveling every day up 2 hours up and 2 hours back to get my blood work, up to the Boston area, north of Boston. I lived in Massachusetts on Cape Cod at the time. And I made the decision along with my husband that I needed to stop. Now, we did eventually, a few years later, have a son. I won't get into all of that, but to make a long story short, this chart clearly shows that it was a heavy year. I made a decision, sun in the 10th house being my identity as being a mother. The sun was conjunct Mars, the Lord of the year. Mars ruled the 4th, and it's in detriment. The sun ruled the 8th house. The 8th house is also about death and rebirth. To me, it was at first, wow, this is the death of my dream of being a parent. I did a lot of reflection that year, because with my sun in Libra, my natal sun in Libra, in the 10th house of the birthday chart, the ruler Venus was in the 12th house of solitude. So the midheaven also, which is the major angle of where I'm headed in life direction, being a parent, career, was conjunct Pluto in Scorpio. So that is, Pluto conjunct the midheaven in a birthday chart, major year. And something's going to change. It's going to be a major transformational year, and often an uncomfortable initiation, sometimes, death and rebirth of a dream, death and rebirth of a career. You have to look at the whole picture. There's a lot here to be looked at. The moon was in the 4th house in this chart, this birthday chart, in the sign of Aries. It's not comfortable in Aries. The moon is a domestic sign that's in its domicile in the sign of Cancer. And it's exalted in the sign of Taurus. So the moon was squaring Uranus. That's a challenge aspect. It was actually forming a grand cardinal cross with Uranus, Mars, and Mercury, and Ceres, the dwarf planet, in the sign of Cancer. Now, Ceres is also the mythic grieving Demeter, the mother of Persephone. So Ceres is also associated with grief and loss. So this was intense energy. It was cardinal energy, so it was a very active year. Even though I did a lot of self-reflection, I decided that I was going to not wallow in self-pity. It took me a little while. And I was going to go back to school. And that's just what I did. And but the eclipses also were definitely affecting the 4th and 10th house and the 2nd and 8th house in my natal chart. So these are just some examples. I think I'm going to give you one more if I have it here. When I was 51, where is that? I had to print out all these charts so I could use these examples with you guys. Maybe I didn't pull it out. No, I did not pull that one out. But that should give you an idea of how a solar return really sheds light on major themes for that year and narrows things down. So if you have any questions about solar returns, or you would like me to look at your solar return birthday chart, please feel free to reach me on Substack or at www.carolbellis.com. I'd love to hear from you. I love solar returns. They're my favorite tool to work with. And I hope you enjoyed learning about this technique. And if you've had experience with it, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you. Take care. Talk to you soon.